Hello, so today we're going to be doing a tier list backed by popular demand. I'm going to be talking about a lot of the units in the current set of TFT set 14. So we're going to talk about the units, how strong I think they are relative to each other, and a lot of times when I do tier lists like this, I'll also sort them by cost, just because I think that, if you're talking about a 1 cost versus a 5 cost, they serve different purposes. One's for high cap, late game potential, and one's usually for like early game transitions, item holding, as well as the potential for reroll, things like that. So I'm going to go through all the units. We did one of these a little bit earlier in this set, but we're going to do one again because, like I said, backed by popular demand. On my YouTube channel, I usually try and focus on guides. Recently, I've been doing a couple VOD reviews just because I've been a bit busy trying to do some other things with life. But either way, it's usually an informative, educational style channel where if you're trying to get the most out of your TFT set 14 experience, I can help you along the way and just talking about different parts of the set and different aspects of the game. But for today, it's going to be mostly for fun, just talk about the different units. And we're going to split them up, like I said, by cost, because I think that there's different purposes that the different units serve based on how expensive they are. So let's start with 1 cost. So when I'm ranking the 1 cost, I'm going to talk a little bit about how strong I think they are early game, into late game, their synergies, if they fit onto final boards, how important I think they are, things like that. And then as we go up the cost, I'll kind of explain along the way why some things are a little bit different. So anyways, Alistar, I think Alistar is really good. I'm not sure if he's like A tier or S tier. We might have to like rearrange some of the tiers a little bit. But Alistar's not like super broken. I think Alistar is really strong. He's really good. The thing about Alistar is he's one of the best early game units. That's like his thing. Basically, Alistar has this really cool passive where he reduces incoming damage. So early game, when there's not a lot, like stage 2, stage 3, there's not a lot of like these heavy hitters, he actually has a really insane amount of damage reduction. And also, he also has, what's it called? Like really good into matchups with like Guinsoo users or stuff like that, like auto attackers, because they usually are like chipping away at you, but Alistar can kind of like block a lot of that. So he's actually really good early, and then he starts to fall off really late. So it's hard for me to say if I want to put him S tier. We're doing alphabetical, but I might move him up to S tier. It's just that I feel like he kind of falls off really dramatically at certain stages in the game. But then, like, even like Greater Moonlight with Alistar 4 is like a really cool condition that you can have in a lot of cases just for like a really reliable late game front line, stuff like that. So he does have good use late game. Golden Ox, he also has like, high cap potential, so he fits onto a lot of final boards. So the traits are also okay. So we're going to start him out with A tier, and then we'll see if we move him up to S tier based on like some of the other units. Mundo, I think Mundo is also a really good tank. So I'm going to put him in A tier. There obviously is the Mundo reroll line where Mundo can just like absolutely destroy. Lots of really good potential. He also has an effect where he gets a lot of value off of HP. Passive getting 30% more health from all sources. So a lot of times with leftover items, even in Street Demon boards or Slayer boards, you can get him to be quite tanky. And he can fit into a lot of boards. His synergies as a 3 trait makes him really viable. He's really good. He's like the cornerstone of like trait tracker cash outs. He's really good to hold on to because you can obviously just fit in like some kind of synergy, usually Street Demon or Slayer or Bruiser. So he's just a great unit to just hold early and also to play around a lot of the time. And he's also pretty reliable as a tank. He's not like somebody who like falls off and is like dramatically bad or anything like that. He's just not as good in like those first couple rounds as somebody like Alistar, but I think he also has a little bit more late game potential as being a 1 cost and fitting onto the board. Jax, I think Jax would be a tier lower, like B tier. I don't think Jax is particularly like bad or anything. He's just very average, right? It's just a very average 1 cost board. Jax's synergies is what makes him, because Exotech and Bastion, he basically is the exact same synergies as Sejuani, which we'll talk about later. So what makes that really great is that he always fits in with Sejuani. They're like a paired duo a lot of the time. You can get in 3 Exotech very easily. Exotech with the Bastion line when you're playing things like Exotech with like Executioners or other types of boards. Also really good. So, but the thing is, I don't see him as being particularly incredible as like a tanky monster or demon unit. So I'm just going to put him in B tier because I think these other two have a little bit more of like, for example, like reroll potential that puts them a little bit above. Next we have Kindred. I'm going to put Kindred in B tier. I think Kindred is really good. She's gotten a lot better. I think she has really good damage output, but she falls off dramatically. So many times have I tried to play Nitro and like or any line with Kindred, and Kindred 3 just like feels like a waste of money a lot of the time. At the same time, really good early game and really good synergies. Once again, we have a 3 trait, Rapid Fire and Marksman makes her very easy to slot into any of those AD lines. So she's really good just to have the synergies active. But a lot of the times it's just like, I feel like even in terms of like early game item holders, I'd rather itemize some of the other one costs, namely Kogma, which I think is A tier for sure. Kogma just pumps out damage like no business, especially if you get Boombot activated. This Kogma, like, if you get a Kogma 2 and you have a Guinsoo, you just know you're win streaking. Like, you just know that you're winning probably every round on stage 2, probably most of the rounds on stage 3. This unit got buffed. This unit is great. There's also reroll Kogma that's broken. There's Boombot, 6 Boombot that just, like, you can Giga Cap your board. I had a game with 6 Boombot where I had, what's it called? Like, Greater Moonlight Kogma. Like, so, like, I was just playing around Boombot trying to tempo, and then I got Greater Moonlight, and I just won out for free. Like, there are so many cool things with this unit, and I think it's extremely strong, extremely powerful. And a lot of times, if you're playing early game and you have those type of AD openers where you're trying to build towards, like, you know, Guinsoo or Rageblade, and, like, you know, some kind of auto attacker kind of build, Kogma is usually the one that you look at, and you're like, yep, that's going to be my good item holder. I'm happy with this. Next, we have Morgana. Morgana also A tier, just pumps out damage like crazy. Insane high cap boards like the Morgana Bastion line, especially if you have a Bastion emblem. Dynamo, insanely good trait, and Divinicorp just easily slotting in on a lot of boards. There's a lot of boards where you just want to play Morgana just for the synergies. Think like those Vex Exotech lines that aren't as popular nowadays but are still quite good. So just like insane reroll, great item holder. She's a little bit specific because she's more of like a blue buff holder, so it might be a little bit awkward, but she's just great anyways. Nidalee, broken. Nidalee just so good as an early game unit. We're probably gonna have to spread out this tier list a little bit because I think everybody's gonna end up in A tier. Because a lot of these one costs, one thing I really like, I'm going to be really honest with this set, I think the one costs are relatively very strong and very applicable. So you'll see me kind of talk about the one cost and not separate them that much. It's very similar to, I think, the previous time I did this tier list a couple months ago. I think the one costs all have a really good function in place. So Nidalee is another example. Nidalee just amp, high cap board, but that's not the reason we're talking about Nidalee. Nidalee 2 is just an amazing early game unit. Similar to Alistar, Nidalee is just like unkillable and does a shit ton of damage, especially if you can get amp activated, because this Nidalee just can drain tank and absolutely like delete boards. It's actually really, really good. So if you're not playing around Nidalee just as like an AP item holder, you know, it might help you out a little bit in those early games. She's just really reliable. Poppy, holy shit, I think Poppy for sure is going to be S tier. So Poppy is a monster. I don't like this unit. I think this unit breaks the game. Like, it just annoys me. Maybe not, but, you know, I won't talk about it too much. But basically, Poppy is really good tank, right? She's pretty hard to kill, especially if you level her up. Bastion, obviously, you can play her with Bastion reroll lines, and she's really good. The other thing that's insane is that she just does an insane amount of damage, right? Basically, what she does is she throws the buckler, which I think I heard some people tell me it's a shield, apparently. I don't know why it does so much goddamn damage, but basically, she can target and snipe the backline very easily. So on stage 2, stage 3, if you get a Poppy 3, stage 4, and later, this unit basically determines the outcome of the fight a lot of the time. She could just easily, if you have a Poppy upgrade and you put some armor on her, she just one-shots, or like, no, I say one-shot, but it's not a one-shot. It's like, you know, she casts like 2 or 3 times and then she kills the backline unit. She is very good at sniping because she has a 4 hex range, right? Something that we'll see in some of the other units later is that 4 hexes is massive. Most units don't have 4 hex range. This 4 hexes is what makes it so insane, because that means that you can easily just position her like close to the center. Like, where is it? Let me go on team builder, right? Like, all you have to do is like, oh, is your enemy carry on this side? Poppy's here. Enemy carry here, Poppy's here. You put her in one of these 2 hexes and she will delete a backline unit of your choosing. It is actually absurd, especially if you reroll her to 3-star. So, like, compared to some of these other units that fall off a little bit as 3-star, even Mundo, like, even if you play, like, a full Mundo board, Mundo isn't, to me, as threatening as a Poppy. Because with Poppy, it's like, if you misposition even a single time against this unit, you just get scammed and you lose the fight instantly. It is so ridiculous. Like, a lot of these units, that's why I think, like, if I had to divide, I think Poppy, out of all of them, has, like, the highest cap potential. Like, I don't even think you have to play her in some spots. Like, I know everybody plays her, like, reroll with Morgana and everything else because it's a really good pairing, right? Poppy tries to delete the backline. Whatever Poppy doesn't finish off, the Morgana will hit and damage over time and tick them down anyways. But Poppy in, like, other board setups does a similar thing if you fit her in, and she's also really good to just streak early game in the same way these other units are. So that's why I put Poppy a little bit above, like in that S tier. But of course, it is a little bit armor dependent, right? You need to have those synergies. You know, you can't just play Poppy like out of nowhere and just expect to like do wonders. But to me, I think that that's like a primo 1 cost. Next we have Saraphene. Saraphene is hard for me to rank. I want to put Saraphene in B tier because compared to some of these other ones, I'm never seeing a Saraphene. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to streak this game really easily. I think Saraphene 3 is a lot better, and I think Saraphene in certain setups is great. Like one of my favorite out of all of these units, I think my favorite unit to play around is Worth the Wait Saraphene if I'm taking Worth the Wait. Now, I'm a big Worth the Wait enjoyer. That's like the augment. You know, if we go augments Worth the Wait, that's the one where you get like the 1 cost. Just for people who maybe are a little bit newer and don't know what I'm talking about, I almost always take this augment because I feel like all the 1 costs are really good, and just having the tempo with it removes a lot of the variance in the set with the encounters and everything. So like Worth the Wait just gives you like a really reliable unit to play around because so many of them are really good, right? I think Saraphene is one of the best ones because she's super flexible, right? You can play her in the same Mundo reroll line with techies, but you can also just play Saraphene into Anima squad, and having the upgrades is really powerful, and she can actually pump out a good deal of damage. So as much as she is one of my favorite units, I'm just trying to say, like, I'm not trying to be super biased, you know, I don't want to rank her above. I do think that compared to some of the other 1 costs, she's not going to be as strong in most other cases, right? Like, if you just have general AP items and things like that. And similarly, Zyra I think also falls in this tier. Even though these are units that you can reroll and play late game, a lot of times like Saraphene and Zyra is usually more contingent on the Mundo having good items in those reroll lines, and also having like, you know, eventually a brand. In a lot of cases, the brand actually can out DPS in some cases if you have better brand items than Saraphene Zyra items. So it just feels like a little bit better in those regards, but they do serve their purpose, right? B tier, I still think these are good units, right? I still think they're well balanced and they're very, very good, right? I'm not saying that they're bad just because it's B tier. I'm just saying, in my opinion, like B being average, these are like what I expect out of a 1 cost. You know, situationally reroll, situationally really strong, good synergies, finds themselves on late game boards because of those synergies, could play around them, item holders early game. They're like perfect. These, to me, these 1 costs are like perfect. I look at them and I'm like, that's how I think 1 cost should be, but that's obviously my opinion, and that's where I put them in B tier. Next we have Shako. Shako, I think, is also B tier. If you have scoped weapons, Shako is Giga S tier. Of course, scoped weapons just broken. I had scoped weapons. Shako beat my Xayah 3. I had a Xayah 3-star, and I lost to Shako 3 in that game because he had scoped weapons, the other player. So, like, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, I understand that there's, like, these Giga win conditions, of course, but generally speaking, Shako is really temperamental. I think he's a good item holder for melee items, but I would rather put those items on somebody else a lot of the time, like one of the higher cost units. Unless you're playing Shako reroll and you have an insanely good Shako spot with, like, Ornn artifacts or scoped weapons or some kind of Giga win condition, I think that it's a little bit harder to like max cap with this unit, if that makes sense. He's a scaling unit, so obviously you need to have good items, good spot for him, and then you can scale and do infinite. But even if you scale the Shako like the entire game, I find that he still falls off even in those like Giga Cap Slayer boards. A lot of times you're using him as a cornerstone to kind of reroll some of the other Slayer units, which is what ends up usually happening. So that's why I'm not putting him in like A tier, even though, like, you know, you might, I think if you have like Ornn artifacts or like good spots, he's like A or S tier. But I think on average, like, he's not somebody that I'm looking at and I'm saying like, yep, I'm going to streak and I'm going to play early game Shako. Next we have Silus. Silus I think is B tier, just solid front line, similar explanation as the others. But Vi I think would be A tier, and it would be like a little bit like this. If we want to like spread out the units a little bit, we could drop some of the B tier to C tier, but I think it's just disingenuous. I think a lot of the 1 costs, I look at them and I'm saying they're all performing at average or above average. And I think that's also pretty obvious because there are a lot of 1 cost reroll lines, right? Morgana reroll with Poppy, Mundo reroll with Alistar, Kogma reroll with Vi, right? Nidalee reroll or Nidalee with Amp. Right, like these are all units that I think, like, you know, are extremely strong, and then even these other units have spots to reroll. I think almost every 1 cost that so far this set has a reroll line available to them. But anyways, let's go through 2 costs now. So with the 2 costs, once again in alphabetical order and ranking amongst themselves. So let's go Darius. Darius I think is pretty good early game. I would say let's start with Darius just being average. I don't know if I'm going to put him in A tier. I think Darius is really strong. Darius also applies a sundering effect, which is really nice. So especially with items not being super obviously like abundant right now, like they made a patch like recently where they give you less components because of the hacked encounters and stuff like that. So Darius just giving a lot of utility is also really meaningful. I think that he's really strong, but he kind of falls off. You don't really want to go for Darius 3 in most cases. And I think even in bruiser lines, he's usually one of the first ones to drop, just because like some of the other ones provide a little bit more value. But I think he does his job well. I think he's just a great unit in general. I think you can play around him in lots of cases. I think even like Twisted Fate or Syndicate lines with him are also fine. So we're just going to put him in B tier and start out like that. Ekko, I think Ekko's C tier. Now, Ekko has amazing synergies, but I think as a unit, this unit is very underwhelming. I feel like itemizing Ekko is almost always wrong. I feel like, you know, of Street Demons, there's other frontline Street Demons that are much better. Of the strategists, obviously, he's like the shitty version of Nico, Street Demon strategist. The traits are amazing. The traits are great. The unit is great, but I think with 2 costs, like if I see like an Ekko, I've never seen an Ekko 3 perform well. Every time I see somebody hit an Ekko 3, that unit dies instantly, right? And maybe it's like a build or something else. I feel like of the 2 costs, this is one of the weakest tanks in the game, at almost all stages of the game. He's mostly just a synergy bot. Like, he obviously fits in perfectly as a synergy, the same way Jax does, but I think Jax is even better of a tank, like, you know, in this, with respect. That's why if I had to rank him, I would put him C tier. Like I said, the synergies are amazing. The board that he fits on are amazing. Obviously, he's like a cornerstone of Street Demon and Strategist and Strat Amp and all of those high cap boards, but he really doesn't do anything, and you almost never want to put items on him. He's just there for the synergies. Next, we have Graves. I think Graves, honestly, I'm going to say Graves is S tier. If I'm talking about Graves, Graves is a great item holder early game. They buffed Graves. He does insane amounts of damage, and he pumps damage like crazy. He's really good for streaking. You just have to be careful about position wise, because sometimes he'll like dash through the enemy and then it'll appear on the other side, and then he can get targeted and just get griefed. A lot of times you want Graves to be paired with a really strong tank for that reason. So if you can find yourself like a 2-star 3 cost or full tank items, because then, you know, your enemy is going to continue to target the tank, and then Graves is free to dash around without getting aggro toggled. Graves reroll is egregious. It's really strong. You have to have a good spot for it because it scales with really high Golden Ox stacks. So Graves reroll is, while it is very strong, you can easily just win every single game just hard forcing Graves reroll. If you play it from bad spots, or not necessarily a great spawn, you don't hit on time, then you will fall behind very fast, because obviously he just jumps the backline and he just dies instantly. But irrespective of that, he's really good on stage 2, really good on stage 3. Synergies for late game or stage 4. He also is really good in a reroll line, and in all cases I feel like he is like so insane. Like, if I have an early game and I have a Graves 1 even, I'm already looking at my board and thinking to myself, maybe I can streak this stage, right? Like, if I'm starting on stage 2, he is very good right now. I have really high evaluation of him as a 2 cost, like as an item holder, which bumps him up dramatically for me. And then there's also the reroll line that adds to it, like extra icing on the cake, that if you just reroll him as well, then that's also a giga cap board that can easily win lobbies. So that's just something to keep in mind. Illaoi, I think Illaoi's with Darius in that B tier range. I think she's good. Maybe I'll bump up Darius or Illaoi to A tier. I think she's a good, reliable tank. I think she's fairly good early game, decent into mid game and stuff like that, but nothing to write home about, in my opinion. She's just really solid at what she does. Similar to Darius, she has an effect where she reduces magic resist here. It's not actually like a percentage, like similar to Darius where he's sundering, but it does help with itemization. So if you're looking for like playing an AP line and you don't have like your static shiv or whatever they call it now, void staff or Ionic Spark, you know, Illaoi can actually help with that. It actually has really good synergy with Illaoi is really good synergy with Leona, because Leona also makes it so that auto attacks do some extra AP, so she does like a little bit of magic resist reduction. And then she also has really good synergy with Anima, because if you end up taking Anima weapons that are AP related, she can also help in making those weapons do a little bit more damage, because if you reduce the magic resist, then the magic damage is gonna do more or should at least. I'm pretty sure it works that way, similar to like regular AP attacks. So like what I'm trying to say is that she's a really efficient unit. But other than that, I don't think she's like a giga tank. I don't think she's like crazy good in reroll. I don't think she's like crazy good in other respects either. Like she's solid. She's exactly what I expect out of a 2 cost. Jhin, I think Jhin goes in B tier as well. His synergies are actually kind of nuts. 3 synergies, really good. I might bump him up. It's just that I feel like he's not as good an item holder as some of the other units. And I don't think there's that many good reroll Jhin lines that you really want to play around. But he also has utility, Sundering, just to keep in mind. So I put him kind of similar in these tier of like very solid, everything I expect out of a 2 cost type of thing. LeBlanc. I think LeBlanc is B tier as well. I think she could pump out damage, but a lot of times you're just playing her with Cypher. There is LeBlanc reroll lines where she pumps out. And she can do a lot, but she's not a unit that I'm necessarily going to reroll or item hold a lot. She could item hold AP items decently if you have a solid front line, because she, as she casts, she generates more sigils. So she can actually scale within a fight. So she's not going to like be super great as a 3-star at the end of the game a lot of the time, unless you're playing like a Cypher kind of board and you cashed out Cypher and then she's going to be a monster. But she could do really well. Like if you play like, a full Bastion frontline or a full strategist board, she will actually like scale to a point where she can actually win a lot of fights. This is something you might have noticed if you were playing Cypher. Sometimes if you're playing Cypher and the fight goes on too long, you grief your own Cypher streak because the LeBlanc just clutches up. She has a really good clutch gene. So she goes in B tier for that reason, right? Exactly what I expect. Nefury, I think, is A tier. I think Nefury can actually pump damage and do really good. If you have early amp and you play around Nefury 2, melee items on Nefury, she can actually just like absolutely delete people. Really good effects. If you have good extra tech items, there's also the Ornn artifacts they make for game winning, right? There also are Ornn artifacts that game win with Graves. Spectral Cutlass Nefury, Giga S tier can easily just like win out with something like that. So there's lots of cool things you can do with this unit. I think that she's relatively tanky, really good like mid game, early game, and late game. So I kind of put her a little bit A tier. Maybe I'm a little bit Nefury biased though, because I think the unit, like I played a lot of the unit before, like when I was starting to rank up. Like I played a lot of Nefury reroll even before Nefury was buffed a lot. So I always kind of believed in this unit, so it might be a little bit of bias. We can argue that Nefury is B tier as well. Like if you think this, that's fine as well. I don't mind. Rost. I think Rost is A tier. It's hard to say. I like Rost a lot. I think Rost is really tanky at certain points in the game. But the thing that's really great with him is the Divinicorp bonus. Rost is a Vanguard, but then he gives armor to everybody. So Vanguard works with like, health shield based on max health and all of that. But Rost also, like you almost always have to play Rost, right? If you're playing Vanguards, the answer is like you almost always play Rost, because Rost just gives your whole team armor. Divinicorp is just such a great bonus that I think that just that alone goes into A tier. I know there's like other things, like obviously Ekko is strategist, and you can argue a similar thing, but I think Rost also tanks really well. Rost can hold items pretty well in a lot of these different comps, and I think that of widespread availability, a lot of times in your early and mid game, I would love to just play a Rost just to get the Divinicorp bonus. There's a lot of times that I just throw in Rost when I'm playing Anima, or even if I'm not even playing Vanguards, I can just be playing like Bastions or something else, and I'll just throw in a Rost because it's like, oh yeah, just plus a little bit of armor, like it can't hurt. It's obviously going to be something good. Just goes into A tier for that reason. Just getting free tank stats on your whole team, it helps your whole team just survive. Even your backline gets a little bit of armor, so everybody just lives a little bit longer. It just helps out a little bit. Next we have Shyvana. So Shyvana, I think, is A tier. Shyvana 3 is a demon. She is hard to kill. A lot of these techie lines, like if you're playing like Vigar, for example, or you're playing Nitro even, Shyvana is just such an insanely good tank. She just lives forever, especially if you itemize her. So like a Shyvana 2, a lot of times, especially early game, you can usually streak in stage 2. I'm a big believer in Shyvana just kind of living for a really long time. However, I think that if you don't hit Shyvana 3, she does fall off dramatically, but I think that's fine because she's a 2 cost, right? I'm not expecting Shyvana 2 to be a monster in stage 3. It's kind of like, in stage 4. I kind of expect her to be a monster in stage 3, right? When I'm thinking of 1 cost, it's more like stage 2, stage 3. When I'm thinking of 2 costs, I'm thinking of like stage 3-ish, right? And then if I'm thinking of like stage 4, then I'm thinking about either 3 cost, 4 costs, or I'm thinking about the 3-star rerolls, right? That's kind of like roughly how I'm like kind of evaluating. Scarnner, I think Scarnner is held up by Kogma, but I'm down to put Scarnner in A tier. I actually think Scarnner is quite tanky. It might just be a Vanguard bias. I think that like Vanguard is pretty reliably tanky, especially in the mid game. I think the Bastions, a lot of times it's mostly like you're playing around the 1 cost and those things. But I think that like and Bruiser's also like maybe, but Bruiser's a little bit less. It's a less popular front line. I feel like if I have a Scarnner 2 in my mid game, I feel like he's really good. And I feel like he's also pretty good on stage 2. But maybe I put him in B. Actually, no, I'm gonna put him in B tier. Actually, I think Shyvana gets the plus because of the 3-star bonus. I think Scarnner is kind of similar to Illaoi and Darius, right? It's kind of I think I'd put him in the same tier as these ones. Like really good at the job, really reliable, does exactly what I think they're gonna do. Twisted Fate I think is B tier, very average, kind of fell off a little bit. But still reliable. You can even reroll him still. I think it's still okay in certain spots. And then Vayne, I think, is B tier. I think Vayne reroll kind of just turned into Senna reroll now, especially after the Guinsoo change. It just makes it a lot better on it. It's not a lot better, it makes it really good as a Senna item. I think Vayne's really good early game. Good for streaking. You could often fit her in with Slayer boards. Like you'll have like an early Jarvan, and then you can use her to itemize to play towards like Vanguard Marksman even. Similar to Senna. You can also like itemize her like around like, having Vayne backline a Mundo Bruiser frontline. She fits in kind of nicely with some of the frontline use because there are quite a few frontline tank slayers. So she's pretty good to play around. And then also Anima. But I think she's very like, normal. I don't think she's like anything crazy. I don't think reroll makes her anything to write home about. Vigar, I think Vigar is B tier. I think some people really, really like this unit and think it's really broken and really strong. I have never believed in this unit, and I probably never will unless they change something. I think he's really good if you have like the Cyber Boss augment that eventually gives you a Kabuko. I think Vigar is good in certain spots, but the spots that he's good in are very rare in my opinion, and usually you're re-rolling him. I think that the item holding that he does, he's like a worse version of holding those items. Like if I have a blue buff and I want to hold a blue buff on a unit, would I hold Vigar with blue buff or would I just play Morgana with blue buff? Right? Like you see what I mean? Like wouldn't you rather just play Morgana with blue buff? Like if I'm playing a Vigar board, which is like Poppy frontline Bastion, like Poppy Shyvana Vigar, would I rather play Poppy Shyvana Vigar with a blue buff or Poppy Shyvana Morgana with a blue buff? I'm not talking about reroll, by the way. I'm just talking about like in our mid game, like the game starts and these are your options. I'm probably playing the Morgana over the Vigar. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like that's how little I believe in this unit to kind of pop off a lot of the time. Now, maybe that's a little bit incorrect. It might be wrong. Like, obviously, I think a Vigar 2 is going to pump out more damage than a Morgana 2, like, for sure, right? But I'm just saying, like, relative cost value, like, that's how, like, hopefully it's, like, illustrated. Like, I don't know if you guys share the same opinion. Maybe you think that's crazy. But either way, even if you don't agree with me there, I don't think Vigar reroll is that good unless you hit Kabuko, which is a really hard thing to do. And I think Vigar reroll is also really good if you're not playing into other rerolls. But when you're playing a 2-cost reroll, the thing you want to see the most is other people playing 2-cost rerolls, because you want to like have the pool thinned out as much as possible to make it easier to hit. So like this unit is very good from like a high roll spot. Like if you have like Caretaker's Favor Vigar that you just get Vigar 3 for free, then that's really good. Then he's going to be insanely strong. But a lot of times I just don't want to play around him, because it's like if I'm playing rerolls, he's going to lose the reroll matchup a lot of the time because his main ability is that he's doing more damage if he's a higher star level. So then he loses a big chunk of his kit that he's balanced around his damage. And then on top of that, Cyber Boss being locked down at 5 cost, it's like if you are not playing Vigar with like the Cyber Boss augment that you just get for free, then Vigar reroll is going to fall off dramatically because you won't reach Kabuko a lot of the time because you're spending all your gold at a low level, right? You're rerolling level 6. There's no odds of hitting a 5 cost on level 6, right? You have to be level 7 to see odds for a 5 cost. So you can roll infinite gold on level 6, and especially if you low roll the Vigar, you're never going to see a Kabuko, because then you just have to push level, and you got to hope you get bailed out by a carousel or something. So that's what I mean. So the spots where Vigar is like game winning, I think have to be high roll enough. Obviously, if you have Vigar 3 for Cyber Boss, you can win the game, and he can climb up the ladder. That's the illustration I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that to me, the points where Vigar wins the game are so far away that I want to put him in B tier, because I think that otherwise he's very mid. Hopefully that made sense. I tried my best to explain myself. If it doesn't make sense, then I don't know. Like, try your best to like be a reasonable person. I don't know. I tried my best. Next, let's do 3 costs. So of the 3 costs, let's start with Braum. I think Braum is definite A tier, just really reliable, really strong front line, reroll lines, really good, either with Syndicate or with Dynamo. Actually, you could play Dynamo with Elise and MF in the back line and just play with the Braum in the front line. His Kingpin bonus is really good, just gets a lot of extra armor, right? 30 armor, 30 magic resist, and then he also does damage. Shielding effects, really powerful. He's really good with extra shielding effects. Vanguard, really strong as well. He also has a chill effect, which basically slows down units, or like makes them attack slower, with the 3 closest units. So he actually has like an effect where if you position him, you can actually like, you know, grief the back line for your opponent a little bit. So positioning also matters with him and can help out a lot. Just a lot of stuff that he's doing. He has a lot of pluses going for him, so I'm definitely gonna put him in A tier. Draven, I think Draven's B. I want to put Draven in B tier. So obviously Cypher, really strong if you hit the Cypher cash outs. Obviously Rapid Fire could be really good. I think that Draven kind of lets me down. Like it's hard to say. I think he's like really good. The earlier in the game, the better the Draven is, obviously. I think that Draven 3 could pump out damage and do amazing things, but it's not a line that you can really play without having the Cypher cash outs. You need to hit like some crazy Cypher stuff to make it viable. So in that regard, I think the unit himself is very mid. And if I'm playing him, like, you know, unless I'm playing like a particular reroll, he's not really going to pop off that much. And it's usually not worth it a lot of the time. He used to be really relevant with Twisted Fate reroll, and then you would put him like kind of over here. But outside the Twisted Fate reroll lines, it's very hard to find a spot where you're playing around him super deep into late game. It's usually just like the rapid fire boards where you're playing like 6 rapid fire. Other than that, he almost never makes it into like a final board unless it's Cypher or rapid fire. And I think that just makes him like kind of mid. I think, like I said, he has insanely high cap. If you have like a Cypher cash out, he's obviously going to be S tier because he just rails everybody. If you have like the Giga Draven 3, 5 Cypher or 4 Cypher, just mega stats, just 3 perfect items, just absolutely sending it down mid with the axes. Yes, of course, but I think like in general, like as item holder, as early game unit, late game unit, I would say he's like average for 3 cost. Elise, I think, is really strong. I'm arguing if I put her in S tier or not. Elise just pumps out damage. A lot of times if you have an early Elise and you make AP items, it can actually streak. Like an Elise 1 on stage 2 is just so unbelievably powerful. Because not only does she fire a bunch of lasers, she also, like, her main ability is like firing these lasers. She does it split between multiple enemies, so she can actually snipe the backline really well, and that actually synergizes really well with her traits of Dynamo, right? You have Jhin, who bounces a ball between multiple units, and you have Morgana that also snipes multiple units. So a lot of times when you're playing these type of boards, she fits in really well with her traits. Additionally, she's Nitro. You have the potential to outscale and play around Nitro, but I think she shines the brightest not playing Nitro. Like usually, like, you know, you go for Elise, you almost always play her when you're playing like these Dynamo boards, just because she's a really great AP item holder. A lot of times when you're playing Dynamo, you actually go for Elise 3, Braum 3, and that's like your win condition or your top 4 condition in some cases. And then on top of that, if we want to take all of that and just like forget about it, she also has utility. She reduces magic resist, similar to like Illaoi. Like it's a flat reduction, it's not like a percentage reduction of shredding, but that still helps with your damage output, especially when items are really hard to make nowadays. I feel like items, like something I'm struggling with because I'm making my item guide and I'm trying my best to like figure it out and make it the best possible. Like the current patch, I'm just becoming more and more annoyed or disillusioned with like I don't know what the right word is, but it's like I'm just getting more and more like it's so difficult to build utility and play around your item components because they reduce the amount of components. So if you don't get like an item augment, or if you don't get like hacks giving you extra components, a lot of times if you build too much utility, you won't have enough DPS. So a lot of times it makes sense to build a lot of DPS, so then units like Elise that do a lot of damage and also have built-in utility like reducing magic resist, they get bumped up a lot. Like this patch, I think these are the units that are so much better to play around because it allows you to be a lot more stable earlier, and you can postpone making those items and you can prioritize having big damage, and having the damage and having some extra effects helps out a lot. I just want to write that home. I want to write that point home as much as I can. Fiddlesticks obviously has his reroll. But I think outside of the reroll, this Fiddlesticks is kind of whatever. Fiddlesticks does have Shred, right? I'm going to point out Shred again. So it's really great to just throw in. But I think he's average, right? I don't think he's anything super crazy. I think if you have the win conditions to play Bruiser, Emblem, Snipers, Focus, Blinding Jewel, like obviously you can put him up there. But I think on average, like if you're just looking at your average case, he's just like whatever. He's very like basic, very like standard. Galio, I think Galio's an amazing tank actually. Galio has this effect where he just turns around and he just stuns a unit. It's so ridiculous. So it's like he's really good at like if you can get him to hit the back line, it's great. Now his effect is only 3 hexes, which, you know, that's part of the reason why I hate Poppy, by the way. But like I don't want to talk about that because, you know, maybe Poppy's somebody's favorite unit. I don't want to offend them because people take it to heart if I say that I don't like a character made of pixels on a game that I play every single day. But whatever. The main thing about Galio is that it's 3 hexes. Poppy is 4 hexes. So don't position your Galio the same way as your Poppy. A lot of times you have to put the Galio like directly in front of the backline unit in order to properly get his effect on the backline. But the stun is really good. He's a Bastion that also gains a massive amount of durability. So he's really good at just being a really strong tank. If you don't believe me with Galio, I recently posted a video on my channel, Win Streak Galio, where I played Galio and I went for like a top 4, just playing off of a Galio 2 very early in the game, and I basically won every single round. I like 10 streaked with the Galio. So it's just a really reliable, in my opinion, really reliable unit in those early games. And he also has a really nice effect that you can actually make good use of. So he also can fit into some of those Bastion late game boards and be a nuisance. Gragas, A tier. Divinicore bonus is just amazing. HP to your whole board is just great. So a lot of times when you're looking at your board and you're thinking to yourself, who should I play on my board as a +1? Gragas is almost always an easy unit to just shove in to just help out your board. It's just amazing. It's just like even Bruiser, it's a 2 trait. If you have Bruiser and Divinicorp active, you can put in like if you use Gragas to activate Bruiser with the Divinicorp, he's basically giving like 160 HP to your entire board, which is a lot of value. That's like everybody just got like a belt on them, right? It helps your whole board sustain itself. He's not necessarily the greatest tank. Like I don't think like reroll Gragas being your main tank is gonna go anywhere, but he's somebody that you can definitely like slot in and play around. Jarvan, A tier as well. Similar to Braum, just really reliable, really strong tank. Fits into a lot of lines. High cap board, 3 synergies, just great. We'll put him in same tier. Jinx, I think Jinx is average. I would put her in B tier. I think that sometimes Jinx can pop off, but not that much. I think she's really good item holder. I think she's good in the boards that you play her in. She can actually pump out damage if you're playing 4 marksmen. You can start itemizing a Jinx, like a Jinx 3, for example. I think Jinx 2 is like a reliable stabilization point if you don't have like Xayah and the whole setup and all of that. But in general, I think she's just like does her job as a 3 cost, B tier. Mordekaiser, same thing, does his job as a 3 cost. This unit's extremely tanky if you're playing around Exotech, so you could argue that he's an A tier, but I think outside of Exotech lines, he's going to be a little bit weaker. Obviously, if you have like the Exotech items and you're playing like Vex with Exotech, Mordekaiser usually becomes your main tank, but I think he does his job really well. I think he's just a really reliable 3 cost that you can play around. Rengar, I don't like Rengar that much, but it's hard for me to rank him. I think Rengar is like shit in everything that he does. I don't know how to say it in a nice way. Chat, help me. Chat, help me. Help me say something help me say something nice about Rengar. He's a cool looking cat. C tier. Okay, let me explain. I think that Rengar is not that great of a melee item holder. I'd rather use other units to hold those items. I feel like he often griefs until you hit Rengar 2, and then by the time you hit Rengar 2, it's already time to like pivot off of it. This unit is not stable if you're rerolling him. Like it's just like if you're trying, let's say you try and do Rengar reroll, like Rengar Jinx reroll or Street Demons or anything like that. He is not stable. Obviously, if you hit Rengar 3 or you have Ornn artifacts, he's really good. But almost at every stage in the game, I just don't want to ever play this unit. I have no faith in him whatsoever. Like, I'm playing Rengar, I put him with, like, BIS items, you know, quote-unquote BIS. I don't really care what you guys think. But, like, or what the stats say or whatever. Like, I'm just, like, trying my best to, like, build items that make sense. And it's just, like, I put, like, Sterix on him, too. Like, even the most broken item right now, which, like, you know, Sterix is just doing really well on, like, everybody. And it's just like, he still just like dies so fast. Like, it's just so sad. And then, like, his damage is really good. Like, he can still win fights and stuff. But it's like, I almost never want to play this unit. Like, I'd rather just play Graves, right? Like, if I had melee items, wouldn't you rather just play Graves? Like, yeah. Like almost always. Like, no, I'm not even talking about reroll. I'm just talking about, like, in the mid game. Like, like, he's just not that reliable, in my opinion. But of course, if you think Rengar is broken, move him up the tier list. I don't really care. Senna, I think, is broken, but it's hard to say. I could put Senna in S tier. I'll probably put Senna in A tier. I think the 3 costs are relatively not that split in terms of how strong they are. I think all the 3 costs are really strong, or relatively strong. But Senna, I think, is just great. She is a good reroll unit, really good item holder. I think sometimes she's like deceptively strong. You really need to have her have some sort of attack speed. And then scaling with damage amp or crit chance, she can do really well because she's going to get a lot of AD. Her Slayer bonus and Divinicore bonus being like Divinicore bonus being more AD and Slayer giving her a bunch of AD, she can actually just delete units. And if you hit Senna 3, a lot of times that's like a really good win condition, especially if you're playing any sort of Slayer related line or Divinicore related line. So she's really strong. Definitely consider playing her, and she's a lot better now because like now bow items are a little bit better because they reworked Guinsoo. I don't even think Guinsoo is that good on her. I think that's kind of like fake news. Like, I think everybody was like screaming about it. Like, Guinsoo on Senna is broken. It's so good. It's so good. Look how broken it is. I think it's not that good anymore. I think it's like what's a little bit overplayed for what it is, but it's still good to streak, right? It maybe not isn't her like perfect items, but it's something that can really help you in your early game. She's a really good item holder, even if you're trying to play like Vanguard Marksman or something, similar to Vayne. What I was saying before, you can play like a Jarvan frontline with a Senna or a Mundo frontline with a Senna. There's a lot of these like frontline units that have tank traits that have Slayer activated. So you can actually just have her synergize with that board, play that board in your mid game, and then convert it to late game. And then also you have Senna reroll that's really strong as well. Varus, I think B tier, does his job as a 3 cost really well. If you're playing like Vex Executioner lines, he also becomes like a secondary carry a lot of the times, especially with good Exotech items. And then Yuumi, I think Yuumi's A tier. She actually pumps out so much damage. She does more damage than Annie. So a lot of times, like even if you have like a Yuumi 2, if you're playing Amp, you just play the Yuumi on your board. She just absolutely like nukes units. She does this effect where she marks like the nearest enemies and stuff. So a lot of times she can also snipe the back line. She's just really good. She just chain cast, really strong unit, especially in your late game if you're playing those amp boards like amp strategist, obviously. But even if you're not playing those, she's really good leading up to that, in my opinion, as well. If you have an item holder that you want for those items, like let's say you're item holding Yuumi and you're gonna play Vex later, or any other blue buff holder, I think Yuumi is just great in those regards as well. I think she can also pump damage in Anima, but that's a little bit more niche and specific because usually you drop the Yuumi in those cases because like you need room for the other ones, right? Like the Auroras and the other synergies, but just general. And then also strategist, good to just buff your whole board as well, but she actually does something, or she feels like she does something, so it actually warrants playing it a lot of the time. Next, let's do 4 costs. Annie is hard to rank. I think the 4 costs I'm going to separate a little bit more because I think there is a little bit more of a division between the units. Annie I don't think is that strong. I think Annie is really good at just providing the tibbers, and I think she's like a cornerstone of playing 5 amp because she adds that extra front line, but she really doesn't pump out that much damage in my opinion. She does have a bit of a wounding effect, so that's like anti-heal built in, so that's great because she could like she can give a little bit of anti-heal. I think it's just the tibbers though that does the anti-heal, but that's something that's really nice about her. But in general, I think she's like the average 4 cost in my opinion. She's really understated or underpowered. Not understated. She's underpowered if you're not playing in those particular lines where she is like a cornerstone, but she's more like a support role, if that makes sense. So I'm okay with that, right? That's why she's B tier. Next we have Aphelios. I think Aphelios is A tier. Just really strong, really reliable, just does a lot of damage, has like a sniping effect where he shows the chakrams or whatever. I don't know what it is, or like, you know, he just does like this huge thing where he like can burst out these large groups as well. Just really strong. So he has like single target, he has AoE, really good traits, marksman and golden ox, right? You have something that scales him with AD within a fight, marksman, right? As the fight goes on longer and longer, marksman scales within a fight, especially if you're playing 4 marksmen. And you have golden ox, which is something that it's like really high cap but also gives you damage amp. So you have really good synergies there, right? Just pair him up with some extra damage or some crit or something like that, and you have a unit that can actually just nuke out enemies. A lot of times you even see a Fellas with gunblade, because this unit does so much damage, you can actually sustain really well with that. Lots of stuff. I feel like his items are really flexible as well. I love when a unit has flexible items. You know, he usually wants to have Ugwinsu, so you have Ugwinsu and then other stuff, you know, but there's so many things you can build with them. It works really nicely, so it makes it not super stressful, and a lot of times it gives you the chance to rearrange your items later. And what we were talking about before, especially on the current patch where there's like overall less items in general to play around because like item deflation or whatever, they made it so you get less components. Having a unit that has that flexibility is also really nice, so I just like him in A tier. Brand, I think Brand is hard to rank. It's hard to rank Brand. I'm gonna put Brand in B tier. Maybe I'll put Annie in C tier. Do I like this? I don't know how to rank this, because I think I'm splitting them up a lot, because I think there is divisions between the units, at least much more clear divisions. But I also, like, you know, I don't want to put Annie in C tier and have people think that Annie is shit. It's just that Annie is so useless if you're not playing 5 amp, right? She's just like a high cap support unit almost. That's what it feels like. Brand is like not as good as Aphelios in my opinion, because Brand, a lot of times your flexibility on your items is a little bit more awkward, and Brand, a lot of times you have to build them within either as a high cap to a reroll board, or you have to play deep into Street Demon just because of the way that the traits and all of the synergies worked out. Techie still doesn't feel like a super good thing to play around deep Techie. If Techie, like final version Techie, like, you know, 8 Techie or something was like viable, he would probably be a little bit higher up. But because you're forced into like a Street Demon board and you need particular items, sometimes he just takes too long, right? Brand has like a clutch gene, but then sometimes he just doesn't have it, right? He takes so long to do his cast so many times that it just tilts me. Like, there's so many fights where you just lose because this Brand takes too long to cast. So I definitely don't want to put him in A tier. He does have AoE, he does hit the back line, he does have he could nuke and do insane damage, but he also requires you to have a really reliable and stable front line. A lot of times Brand boards without, like, you know, added Samira or added Ziggs are going to be problems. Next we have Cho'Gath. I think Cho'Gath is a really good tank. I'm going to put him in B tier. I think he performs exactly as he should as a 4 cost. I think that, you know, maybe if Bruiser was a little bit more popular with some other synergies, he'd be a little bit better. But of course, I think that totally fine, just B tier, so very solid. Leona, I think, is a really good tank. She's really hard to kill. I'm going to put her in A tier. I think she's just one of the better tanks. Fits herself into a lot of lines. Anima just helps her out a lot. She just gets some armor, and she has really good effect with getting some extra durability. She also makes sure your team does a little bit more damage, which isn't that important, right? It's mostly just like some extra bonus magic damage, not super massive, but it does help a little bit. You know, she has that, and I think she also had a stun, right? If I'm not mistaken, right? Deal magic damage to the largest clump within 2 actions, stun the center enemy for 2. Yeah, she also has a stun. Yeah, so really good to play around as well. Just lots of utility, really hard to kill, pretty reliable. Definitely A tier. MF, I think MF is like I think MF is really strong, and I think she can actually delete boards. She has really good traits, right? She's really good with like Dynamo, and even with high cap syndicate boards, she can actually like clean up. However, I feel like if I'm ever solo carrying MF, it feels just awkward. Like, she just doesn't feel like she pumps out enough. I think it's just because she takes too long to get to that casting point, which means that you either need to play really deep into Dynamo, or you have to have some kind of supporting augment to make her like really clean up. So I think she's like B tier. She performs like how I expect a 4 cost to perform, but nothing more than that. Nico, I think Nico is A tier. She's a really good tank. I think of the tanks, she's like, I think Leona and Nico are definitely above Cho'Gath, so that's why they go into A tier. So like, you know, of course, like, you know, you could argue that they're all like mid, and you could like put these ranks and squish them all together. I think right now, like I said with some of the other cost units, I'm making a little bit of a division between the costs, but I want to make it very clear. I think that all the units have very good potential and are very well balanced with each other, right? Like I'll speak to it very briefly here. I really dislike this set, and I don't think I'll be playing that much more of this set. I'm just trying to grind to Grandmaster, but I'm having such a miserable time that I'm just throwing my games because I'm just not having fun at all. But one thing that this set did amazing is balancing of the units, right? If we look at these 4 costs, almost every 4 cost has a quote-unquote meta comp that you can play around, right? Almost every single one has conditions where they are viable and playable. So that is amazing, right? I think they're all very well, like, diverse and, like, able to be played around. When I'm ranking these, I'm just talking about a lot of things like flexibility, how well I think they perform their tasks, and a lot of that just comes down to spots and positioning, right? Obviously, Miss Fortune, she can be the best 4 costs in the game if you hit particular conditions that make her really well. The balance of this set is amazing. There are so many different comps that are playable. Same with 1 cost, same with 2 costs, same with 3 costs. I want to reiterate that because I'm not trying to make it so that I'm, like, you know, complaining about any of these units. I just want to make it very clear to you guys. They all have really good spots, and you can basically win a game with any one of these units given the right conditions, which is actually a very fun and cool aspect right now to how it is. The part of the set that I don't like is the encounters and the balance that they did with the items. Those 2 things have ruined the set for me. I heavily dislike encounters. If you like them, that's fine. And I heavily dislike the fact that they reduced the items to compensate for the encounters, because that made the current patch very awkward and very miserable for me, because it completely goes against what I fundamentally play and style of playing TFT, which is just really miserable. Anyways, Sejuani has a massive stun, but she's not that good of a tank. I'm gonna put her in B, maybe A tier because of the stun, right? A tier because of the stun. Is that safe? Right, but I think in terms of tanking, she's like similar to Cho'Gath. I think she's not as good of a tank. Next we have Vex. I think Vex is B tier. She's really good at pumping out damage, really strong, but her conditions are very specific. You need blue buff, you need Gunblade. If you don't have those 2 items, you can't really play Vex. She's just not going to function properly as a unit. You could maybe play some interesting lines sometimes. Like one time I had Golden Ox Vex because I was playing like a Graves reroll and I had a Golden Ox emblem and she was like absolutely nuking, right? I'm not saying that she's not she's incapable of functioning without those items. It's just that if you're trying to play primary carry Vex and that's your game plan from start of the game, you need some conditions, so she's in B tier. I think she can pump out damage like the rest, but she's similar like MF and Brand. Xayah, I think Xayah is really good. Anima and Marksman, I think she can do insane things, so I'll put her in A tier. Zed, I think, is B tier. After today, I want to put Zed over here, but that's mostly for memes. He's definitely B tier. I think Zed is really strong. I think Divinicorp Zed is really strong, but I think there are, like I said with some of the other comps, very strong conditions in order to make him function correctly. What I hate is that with Zed, like, it feels like it's always RNG if you can get him on the back line if the unit's position, like, perfectly, like, away. Because he dashes within 4 hexes, which is great. But the problem is, like, with Zed, so much of his power comes from you sniping the enemy carry early on in the fight. He's pretty good. I feel like Zed would be really good if he could hold 1 extra item. That's why Divinicorp Zed feels so good. Because if you get Divinicorp bonus on Zed, it's as if he has an extra item. Because with Zed, I feel like you want him to be tanky enough to survive, that dive in the back line, because sometimes he just gets nuked, he gets 1-tapped. You want him to have enough, like, attack speed and AD or, like, just general stats to, like, do the damage. And then you also want to have him, like, ideally, like, 1-shot, because you want him to, like, you know, delete the backline as soon as possible. So in order to scale up the damage, you usually suffer in some of the other regards. You want to have survivability, but then, like, if you have survivability, you don't have the stats, and it feels like he needs an extra item. And then he would be the most broken unit in the game. So what ends up happening a lot of times is Divinicorp Zed is so great because you get all those extra stats, so you actually can, like, work around your items in such a way where he is broken and really strong. But that makes him very particular to certain conditions, which makes him a little bit harder to play around. So if I was trying to play around melee items, I would be really scared, especially because Z1 feels very unstable. That's another thing. It just feels so incredibly unstable to play Z1. And then there's also the RNG of if the unit's positioned with, like, 2 units equidistant from each other, the Zed sometimes just doesn't target the right unit, which is just so miserable. So unbelievably miserable. But, you know, that's just this. Zeri, I think Zeri is also playable in spots. I'm going to put Zeri in B tier for sure. Obviously, really strong. But, you know, you need to have, like, good items, like Pulse Stabilizer. If you don't have Pulse Stabilizer, I don't think you can play Zeri. But Zeri MF, similar things, like, conditionally, she can do really well. Ziggs, D tier. Now, why is Ziggs D tier? Ziggs has a bug. Sometimes with Ziggs single target damage, if he doesn't hit multiple units, it just fizzles out and it does pretty much 0 damage. If you play around Ziggs, he's really good. He could often do insane amounts of damage, but sometimes he just griefs your game and you lose the game because of it. So it has happened to me. It's happened to me multiple times. I've watched it happen to other people. It's a known bug. They fixed a bunch of other bugs with Ziggs. This new one came out this patch. So I try my best to avoid Ziggs as a primary or Ziggs as a main unit on my board. You could still play him. Obviously, when you play Brand Strategist, you still play him because you need the synergies and stuff. And he's still going to pump out damage, right? But he is not at a consistent point where I can rank him above anything but D tier, right? Because I do not want to give you guys the impression that I think Ziggs... Like, I thought Ziggs was really strong. And even in my patch notes, I said, I think Ziggs is going to be a great unit to play around. I don't think so anymore. Be careful out there. My bad. I was wrong. And finally, let's go 5 costs. So Aurora, the 5 costs are going to go really fast. Aurora, A tier, extremely strong. Great +1, throws an extra unit. Garen, A tier, a little bit of RNG, could cap your board really high and you can win the game for free. Kabuko, B tier. I think this Kabuko does very little, and unless you have boards that support him, he has an insane stun. Actually, no, stun A tier, but as a unit, pretty shit. Renekton, I think, is B tier unless you have certain conditions for him. He kind of doesn't do that much, just Divina Core bonus. Samira, A tier, just really strong. Urgot, I think A tier, really strong. Viego, I think C tier. I think this unit doesn't do anything for much of the time. I think he's just a lot worse. Zac, S tier. Zac is the win condition for almost every comp. Every comp that you play, if you can find a Zac early and you can play around Zac, Zac is the win condition for every comp. This unit is not balanced. If you scale him up at a certain point, the Bloblets, like 30 or 40, you just win the game for free. I have lost with Leona 3 to a Zac 2. A Zac 2 40 Bloblets. I lost with Leona 3. I've lost with Xayah 3. I've lost with so many 3 stars that I've given up. Like, you just have to play Zac if you're trying to play for first, right? First place, a lot of times is determined if somebody hits an early Zac. It is that strong. So if you're not proper, if you're looking at it and you're like, you know, I don't think it's that broke. It's like, no, I don't, like, you know, I have firsthand experience, you know, I have the VODs. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, you know, it's not balanced. It's crazy. It's not even that many stacks, by the way. Right? Like, I lost to 40 stack Zac with a Leona 3. Like, really? 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 Yeah? That's balanced? Yeah? No, he's S tier, okay? He's S tier for sure. If we're talking about Kabuko, like, no stun, I would actually put Kabuko in B tier. I'm actually going to move him down 1. Kabuko, I think that if you just have a random Kabuko 2, he really doesn't do that much besides the stun. And relative to the other 5 costs, I don't think he's that crazy. And Samira just gets this bump because if you play 5 strategists, it's like a game-winning comp. So Samira just gets the bump. But outside of strategists, Samira is like D tier. Sorry, outside of AMP, excuse me. Outside of AMP, Samira is like D tier. Like, or actually, no, in Street Demon she's also pretty good. We'll just keep her in A tier. And I'll put Kabuko in A tier just because the stun is good enough that you would put him up in A tier. Okay? I think that's fine. Anyway, those are all the 5 costs. Like I said, I talk about the 5 costs a lot. I made many different videos on the 5 costs. So we're not going to like talk about them too much because it was a subject of many of the other videos. But anyways, that's the end of the tier list. Usually these are a little bit longer. Hopefully it was fun and enjoyable. And like I said, it was from popular demand. I've also had a lot of requests to do another item tier list. I'll probably do that a little bit later. I just don't want to do it right away because I think I just recently did one before they did the item changes, so like 1 or 2 weeks ago. So a new item tier list will probably come out like later next week, like maybe next weekend or something like that. So if you're looking forward to those tier lists, you know, just subscribe and then you'll eventually get a nota for it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and see ya. Bye-bye.